Hey.
Hola.
Hey.
Oh, trying to work it out, guys. How you doing?
Great.
All right, boys.
Great, man.
Oh, man. I was just getting a bit nervous there trying to work it all out, but we are live for the first time.
Please, it's 2 minutes past. What were you at? What
I
we doing?
know. I know. How you guys doing? All right?
Doing
Good.
great.
I've got a beer in hand, ready to go.
Excellent.
It's Saturday night. Why not?
I'm going to show you what's right over here. That's the liquor cabinet, so I'm not far from that.
So let me introduce you guys then. So we've got Bryan Lee on the channel. We've got Mark Cloer. He's back. We've got Darren from Sleeve Saturday, of course. And we've got Jonathan Johnson of Deny the Fallen, the metal band. How you doing, guys?
Great.
Cool. So loads of expert knowledge going on. I'm sure if anyone asks a question, we'll know it straight away between us anyway. So we're going to talk about 1989. Before I do, I just want to plug something, just a quick something. All right, is that all right?
Yeah, go for it.
So a mate of mine, you might know him as well, Jonathan, Martin Simpson.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so brilliant single out. Martin Simpson's Destroyer of Death is his project he's got going on. He's already produced one single, which you can catch on YouTube. It's actually called Destroyer of Death. It's got CJ Grimmark, who's an amazing guitarist in the Christian metal, genre, and Rob Rock, the one and only Rob Rock on vocals. So an excellent single, and working on a second one, I believe. So, and Jonathan, you're working on a new album, so we can't wait for that either.
Yes, sir, me neither.
So we're here to talk about 1989, and if all goes well, we'll do a few more of these and go through the years. So the best albums, if you like. So before we go ahead, I'm going to make you all feel really old now, and I'm going to talk about, just give you a quick rundown of events that happened in 1989. The main stories. Now these are in date order, so if something seems really serious, then there's a bit of a funny one. It's not done on purpose. All right, it's just date order. So 1989, January the 20th, George Bush, 41st president. Yeah, wow.
The first one.
Yeah. January the 20th.
Not the sequel.
Yeah, January the 24th, 1989, Ted Bundy gets electrocuted. Gets done. February the 2nd, Sky TV is launched. This makes you feel really old now. February the 14th, Salman Rushdie releases his satanic verses and gets everyone after him. March the 1st, Iceland, and not the shop for anyone who's in England, ends its prohibition on beer. So they actually didn't have any beer until then. So now it's known as Beer Day. April the 1st, Margaret Thatcher introduces poll tax. You guys won't know about that in America, I'm afraid, but it weren't good. The Hillsborough disaster was in April as well. 96 Liverpool fans died in the stadium. A disaster. Really bad that was. The first McDonald's was built in Russia. First high definition television broadcast in Japan happened that year. You remember the Chinese guy stood in front of the tanks? Yeah. The image of him. That was then. That was in 1989. We had Nintendo launched as well. The Berlin Wall came down. Probably the biggest news of that year.
Yeah.
And the first episode of Simpsons was on. There you go. 1989. That's
and they haven't been off since, I don't think.
No, exactly. So Taylor Swift was born. There you go. And Betty Davis died in that year. Mm-hmm. And number one in the UK was Black Box. Remember that, Darren? Black Box? Ride on Time.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Number one in Ireland was Especially for You, Jason Donovan and Kylie Minogue.
Top tune.
And number one in the US was Janet Jackson, Miss You Much, for the most weeks. There you go. Bit of useless trivia before we start. So we're going to
even
talk
looking
about.
it up, Lee. I can imagine you all day today just looking at the little facts.
I know. It's had to get a few just to make you feel old. You know what I mean? So, just to let everyone know who's watching, we're going to talk about the best albums of 1989, and this is the best albums they're our favourites. So we've got these lists together. We've got 3 lists to talk about. Actually, we've got the main list, which is 10 albums. We all said what we wanted included, and if it got more than one vote, if you like, between us, we included that album. Now we've got some honourable mentions. You guys, these are the ones that only one person wanted on there, so it's got an honourable mention. And I made a few others that I thought should be mentioned. So these are our favourites. These are not what sold the most, or anything what everyone thinks are the best. This is what we like. What it's usually about on this channel, isn't it? It's opinion, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So we're going to try and keep our eye on the call. Well, I am. I don't know if you getting comments as well, guys, on yours. You're not.
No, it's probably just for you. You're the moderator, so it's probably popping up for you, Lee.
So cool. So I'm going to try and keep my eye on the comments. If anyone mentions any albums that we're missing or anything like that, let's mention a few people that are watching. Actually, we've got Dave Cruz watching. Jonathan,
Dave.
Our mate Dave.
He was just here in Mexico with me last week.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, some lovely photos coming from Mexico. Thanks for that. I'm in the freezing cold in England.
Hey, man, I'm just trying to do my part to keep you warm.
We got my daughter Amber watching. So
Amber.
she's watching. Yep. We got we got Martin Simpson watching, actually. Pure Metal Fan Magazine he's honing in on.
What's up, Martin?
We got who else have we got? Well, we got 14 people. They're the people that have commented so far. So excellent. No, I'm glad because I didn't know who was going to come on. I think I've got my next door neighbour watching as well, abusing me while I'm doing this. So that's cool. And my missus as well. So there you go.
Well,
right, okay.
Shout out to Amber because she does a lot of behind the scenes work for you, doesn't she, Lee? So well done,
yes. Amber. Yeah, Amber does editing for me when it's important stuff, like I'm interviewing people like Jonathan Johnson on there. She does that editing for me. So I do the editing for the people that don't matter. I'm only joking.
Me and Mark are on.
Well, heck, man, I don't know how you didn't do mine then.
Now, you guys, before we start, and I know I'm soppy and all that in my old age, but met some amazing mates on here, some friends, across the world. And since I started doing this, we're not allowed to go out much. So I started doing this, and met some amazing people, musicians, and become my friends and that. So it's been brilliant. Do you know what I mean? Absolutely, it's opened up all sorts of stuff for me. And I always thought I'd never be one of that people that goes on YouTube and starts a channel and all that rubbish. I hate them people.
Surprise.
And then now look at me. Look, there you go. So we're already getting some comments about albums. We're getting, these may be mentioned later. So we're getting Sabotage, Gutter Ballet, and we're getting White Cross as well from Martin Simpson. So we're gonna go through, and I've done these. We're going to talk about the 10 albums, and we're basically, people are assigned to talk about these. These are the people that wanted these to talk about them. So we're gonna, each album is in date order of when it was released as well. I didn't know what order to do it in. There's no best of, these are just 10 albums that between us, we love. There you go. So cool. We're going to start the first one we're going to talk about. And it's me and Bryan that actually suggested this one. And it's Tesla, the Great Radio Controversy. So, or controversy, as other people might say. I don't really know. Released on the 1st of February, second album. This one went double platinum in 1998. So, Bryan, you kick us off with this, mate. Talk about Tesla for you. I've got plenty to say on this as well.
Well, it was released on February 1st, 1989 by Geffen Records, recorded at Beersville Studio in New York in 1988. It's my second favorite Tesla album because their first, Mechanical Resonance, was just out of this world. But some of the songs are not too poppy. They got a lot, they got a lot of good groove to them. My favorite song is "Hang Tough" because it starts with a kind of like a mechanical bass pattern before the dual guitars come in.
Yeah.
That I'm a bass fanatic. All my musical heroes are bassists except for the Abbott brothers. It's just this album is great, and I would recommend it to anybody if you're new to heavy metal in general.
Yeah.
It's a great album to start with.
But they brought something different, man. In them 80s, it was getting. I think the first album was 86, but they brought something different because you had all the hair metal and stuff. A big shout out to my daughter as well, who's watching. My other daughter Jade, by the way, and George. So they're watching here. And Sleep Betrays Me as well. Has just said hello, so that's cool. Yeah. So Tesla, man. I mean, they stuck out, didn't they? They came in the mid 80s when the hair metal and the glam and all that, and they just came with their jeans and t-shirts on, and you're right, man. They rocked out. They really did. They was straight up sort of bit bluesy as well. Loved Jeff Keith, the singer. Apparently, Jeff Keith. I mean, he's an amazing singer, but I mean, he honed his skills working on a building site, singing in his tractor or something in his truck. So
he was a truck driver, wasn't he?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and when I first heard his voice, I was just amazed, and I just love Tesla. Always have.
I mean, the bluesy sound and the vocal harmonies, rich sound that they have.
Yeah.
Just amazing.
Yeah, brilliant band. I actually managed to catch him. I was gutted. I didn't see him in the 80s. And hello to Gavin, by the way. All right. Hello to Gav. All right. So there you go. Yeah, I mean, I was gutted. I didn't see him in the 80s when they were at their height, but I saw him. I saw him in about 8 years ago, I reckon, in a little pub in London. Held about 400 or 500 people. And they was amazing then, just as good, as I saw videos from back then. They were amazing, man. So I love Tesla.
What's the difference in lineup now from when you saw them a couple of years ago?
They've got one of the guitarists has definitely changed because I think one of them had a bit of a alcohol issue or a drug problem or something. He's doing something else now, but one of them stayed. The main one stayed.
Frank Hannon.
Frank Hannon's he's still with them. The other guy, he's doing some stuff. I saw him in another band. He brought some stuff out the other day, a single, and it was quite good actually. Thompson, is it Steve Thompson? I think his name is. He was the one they had problems with. I don't know the full extent of it, but I think everyone else.
You have a couple of changes then in lineup from their heyday, effectively.
Yeah, but they've really kept that sound all the way along. I think their last album was a little bit. They got a lot of links to Def Leppard, and they're good mates with them. They toured with them.
Yeah,
the last album was a little bit Def Leppardy. I think it was produced by Phil Collin as well.
It was.
I was introduced to Tesla at a Def Leppard concert when Def Leppard, I believe, was touring with Hysteria. They came to town and Tesla opened up for them. So that was my introduction right there, and loved them ever since.
Yeah. I always felt like they had the same mojo as like Guns N' Roses or something. They just had that classic rock and roll, with that hint of metal on their sound. But I always felt like had they been a little sleazier and a little bit more personality based, they could have been another Guns N' Roses.
Yeah. I think you're right. They definitely gave something different, which is what Guns N' Roses did as well, didn't they? For sure, definitely. Right, we got a couple of ones that we're not actually we haven't got on our list. So I don't know if anyone can talk about these. There you go. Alice Cooper, Trash came out. Anyone like a bit of Alice Cooper? Oh, not much reaction there.
Alice does a great live show. That's all I can say.
Yeah, he does.
Kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, he does. To be fair. Yeah, he does. To be fair.
We've got Dave Cruz, Wrathchild America, Climbing the Walls. I haven't heard of that.
You heard of that one?
No, there
I
you
remember
go.
it.
See?
It's been so long since I've heard it. I'm not even it's been probably 15 years since I even heard a song off that record. But yeah, I remember them.
Martin Simpson's mentioned Rage of Angels. Don't know if you know much about them, Jonathan. I'm not really
Yeah,
too...
I think they had members from another band like Steelheart or something like that. I forget, but they actually put out a record in the Christian rock world. Just a one-off. It was pretty well received. I remember the album, but they never followed it up, so I don't know what happened to them. But I think it was somebody like Steelheart or one of those bands that had some of the members, maybe the singer from that band or something.
Yeah. If there's any comments that are coming in from people that we're not, and I'm not mentioning it, it's probably because it's going to be mentioned a bit later on, just to let you guys know. I've got my missus mentioning Stone Roses here. I mean, they're not really metal, but anyone like the Stone Roses?
Well, where's your thoughts on it? You've slagged off Oasis a little bit, which came after them, Lee.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts? I mean, you're British. What's your thought on that Britpop kind of thing? I'm not saying Stone Roses are Britpop, but
No. Listen, I tried to get into a lot of music, and I did I tried to get into different stuff apart from metal, and it lasts about a day. You know what I mean? I try, and I get upset with myself sometimes because I want to like different stuff, and I think it's just me. It's just in me that's it. I'm a metalhead, and I won't ever be anything else.
Well, you're better off not liking other stuff anyway, because Mark Cloer will just take the piss out of you in the video if you like anything else.
Yeah, you're right there. You're right there.
I love you, dude.
We've got a couple of Stone Roses fans. We've got a couple of Stone Roses fans here, though, because someone else has mentioned Stone Roses. Someone said that. Oh, someone's mentioned Nirvana, Bleach. Oh, I didn't even know it was out then, but you know,
I thought that didn't come out till 90 or 91.
Oh, it was 89.
Was it 89?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, that's me, Mrs. Oh, I'm gonna have to tell her to stop. Stop mentioning that grunge shit. There you go.
Oh my God! Had I known that album came out back then, I probably would have ended my career that year.
Yeah. Well, that was the first. That was the first one, wasn't it? Then Nevermind came out after. That was the one that really done everything, didn't it?
Yeah, Nevermind.
There you go. Right, we've got another one to talk about. We've got DAD. I remember them. No Fuel Left for the Pilgrims. I remember that band, but I don't remember that album. I don't know if it was there. I don't know anything about them much. Yeah. But right, should we get on to I'll try and keep an eye on the comments as we go. But go on.
A little something about 1989 was a very interesting year for music. Glam or hair metal was on the way out. Like you said, unfortunately, grunge was on the way in. Traditional metal and thrash continued to skyrocket, and metal expanded into things like grindcore, death metal, power metal, and industrial around this time. So metal's branching off, and I don't know where. I know where Mark lies, and Mark's mostly traditional metal. He never got into death metal like I did. So I've expanded my repertoire, and there are some albums in '89 that came out in the death metal scene that I'd sent to Mark, and he said we probably won't delve into that. But '89 metal was changing.
Oh yeah, I mean, the thing is, I've spoken quite a few times about that sort of metal, that extreme metal, if you like, and the music is outstanding. You know, a lot of the music is outstanding, and I don't know. Sometimes it's the vocals for me, and I try to get past it. I try to look at it as another instrument, you know, and if it's used subtly, and I don't mean to creep around Jonathan here, but I don't know if anyone's heard Jonathan's band Deny the Fallen, but it's very subtly used. He's got growls in there that Jonathan actually does, but it's like it's along with the lead vocals. It's
more for effect than
more for effect, yeah. And yeah, it's not like it's the main vocal that's all you can hear is those.
It's almost a character in the story more so than
driving full growl throughout the whole album.
Yeah,
I got you.
That gets old. It does.
Definitely, it's used now and again. It's not used on every song. It's like now and again, and when it is used, it's very subtly. So we've got Aaron White. talking about. Oh, his comment's gone actually. Don't know if it was wrong. He said Soundgarden, Louder Than Love. I don't know if that was 1989. But we have got Sacred Warrior mentioned by Dave Cruz. So Jonathan was in Sacred Warrior, weren't you, mate?
Never heard of him.
So you got Master's Command, which was you in the band then?
No, that was about 89, 90. That was about a year and a half before my tenure with them. So,
yeah.
But yeah, that album, I feel, I was a fan of Sacred Warrior before I was in Sacred Warrior. So I have a unique position to kind of speak on the band because I was a fan, then I ended up in the band, and then I was out of the band, and they got a second singer at that point when Ray left the band. But that album has some killer material on it. It's great, just that Queensryche with some heavier elements in it. That kind of gothic operatic vocal style, just killer songs, very hooky. But the production was trash. And, I could say that as a fan, and pretty much any member of the band would tell you that they weren't happy with the production on that record at all. And I really felt like that album might have been their best had they had a killer production on it. And it really was crap.
I think
the production was terrible.
I think that if you hear the production then of a lot of those Christian metal bands, apart from the obvious ones like Striper and stuff,
right?
It was very similar, wasn't it? Very sort of muddy, and I mean, it's a bit like the thrash metal was like that at the time. It was like everyone was doing the same production at the time.
Yeah, I mean, the budgets weren't there. I mean, to compete, and at that point in time, you didn't have the digital recording generation that hit, just in immediately after in the 90s and stuff. So the expenses for making albums was still extremely high. I remember we paid like between $300 and $500 an hour for recording time when we made Obsessions, and so we didn't have like these huge budgets to work with. So there were a few bands that actually had what I would consider to be major label production quality, but it was kind of rare. There was still a little hint of that demo-esque vibe on the productions, even during that era. But the ones that actually had the better productions tended to, be the top level bands in the genre. And we were lucky. I mean, we had bigger budgets than most, so we were able to, at least compete, But
Jonathan, if you're a fan of a band, right? I don't want to slow down the video, Lee, but if you're a fan of a band before you even joined the band, how do you decode that a bit in your brain when you get into the band? Like, do you have to take a step back and go, right, I was a fan of the band, now I've got to just take it from here kind of thing? Or how does that affect you if you've already been a fan?
Well, it was weird for me because like the members of that band were in their mid to late 20s at the time. So they were in the height of their career. They had 3-4 albums out at the time. They were one of the top 4 or 5 bands in the genre in the world. So they were extremely popular, extremely successful. And I was a 19-year-old kid. So I got the gig. We had opened for the band a few times with my band. They were actually fans, especially Ray, the singer for Sacred Warrior. He was a fan of my band previous, who had opened for them multiple times. And the relationship was kind of cemented during that time. But I ended up being, a 19-year-old kid in a highly successful band, immediately just getting launched out of a catapult, But for me, I think, ignorance, not understanding how big the moment was, that helped me, because I wasn't overwhelmed by the moment because I was too young to even realize how big the moment was. So, yeah, I kind of just got in there and started running. And,
you're on the roller coaster. You just go with it.
Yeah, I did what I always did. I just let instincts kick in. And luckily for me, the band was in a position at the time where they needed a fresh injection of energy into the band. They were just kind of burnt out from multiple years of touring and writing and the whole cycle. And I just came in with kind of fresh ideas and fresh creativity. And I just expected to be a role player, but they just grabbed a hold of my songwriting and was like, just took me off a leash and said, go for it. And I ended up writing, a ton of material on the Obsessions album, which I did not expect. I figured I was just going to kind of have a minimal role in the writing. Ended up playing over half the solos on the record. And anybody that knows Sacred Warrior knows that Bruce Swift was, a legendary guitar player in the genre. very well known, and it just kind of blew me away that I was given that much latitude as a kid. So it like I said, I hit the ground running and didn't really realize that it wasn't supposed to happen that way. It should have been much slower. I should have kind of taken a more backup role as a role player, and they just kind of said, no governor on you, just go. And I did, and for that reason, is the Obsessions album, the one that I wrote and played with them on, is their most popular, biggest selling record. It's like number 7 all time on the Christian metal list, according to most of the press people, right behind Stryper, To Hell with the Devil, strangely enough. But like I said, I was 19 at the time, so I was just going by instinct. But it's not my favorite Sacred Warrior record, due to the fact that I was a fan before, so I was able to enjoy the previous work as pure Sacred Warrior music, and I felt like what I brought to them was a hybrid. It changed their sound a bit, and even though it was more taken better by the fan base and more successful, I still don't feel like it was pure Sacred Warrior. It was a bit of a change, and for me as a fan first, I kind of leaned towards Wicked Generation, the previous album, and probably because I toured off that record as well, so I got a lot of fond memories of that album. But anyway, not to hijack the narrative here.
Sorry, Leo. I was just interested. Not don't mean to slow down the video, but
no, man, it's cool. I love a bit of insight into that sort of stuff. So, right, okay, we're going to move on to the next album, which came out. Just give me a second. 21st of February, obviously 1989. TNT, Intuition. So, I mean, this was a little bit of a different direction for the band. I think it went a bit more melodic, I would say, a bit more, people would say commercial. I don't really like saying commercial, but yeah, a little bit more commercial. The sign of the times, as people say, the production was very glossy and sweet. But I loved it, man. This was a brilliant album for me. One of my favourites of that year. Tony Harnell's just got an amazing voice to this day.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? What an amazing voice that guy's got. This was like one of those ones when every song was sounded like a single. It was just an amazing album. But like I said, went in a little bit of a different direction, a little bit more commercial, trying to get that American market, I suppose, a little bit. But and what about Ronnie Latecro for a guitarist? Man, oh God,
that guy had a monster tone. I mean, I was always envious of his tone. Just killer guitar tones for back then.
And he done some strange things on the guitars. Back then you just wondered, was that an actual guitar? Was he doing that on the guitar? Is that a machine in the studio? And the sort of stuff he used to do. And when he used to work his way up that fretboard, it sounded different than anyone else. It sounded, you could hear everything, that he was doing. Amazing, absolutely amazing. Anyone else a bit of TNT here? Mark, you like a bit of TNT, didn't you?
Yeah, I much prefer their earlier 2 albums, Knights of the New Thunder and Tell No Tales. Like you said, Intuition got a little bit more AOR-ish for my taste. It was more rock than metal. But like I said, I think they were going for probably aiming more for the American audience, things that were a little more commercial sounding at the time.
I mean, it was their most successful album in the end, Intuition. But, like Bryan said earlier, after that, it's just that difficult time, wasn't it? The 90s was just, for them sort of bands, they either had to change, and they did try and change, and that weren't much success for many people anyway, was it? Or they went, they just carried on as they did. But, I don't know.
A lot of those bands, I think, were just in a total state of confusion as to what direction to go. Do they stick with the old formula that, like Ryan said, was kind of on the way out, or go for that more stripped down sound of the grunge that was coming in? They were some of them were kind of caught in that limbo and didn't know which way to go.
Yeah. Definitely, mate.
Yeah, they were running around. A lot of bands were running around with their heads on fire, weren't they? Didn't know what. You didn't know whether to stick or twist.
Mm-hmm. The bands that came out during that era, though, like 90 through 93, 94, the metal bands and the rock bands that did come out, they tended to be solid. It's just the bands that were popular in the late 80s didn't know how to make that transition. You know, so it's the unique bands that came out during that era that kind of the era produced them. You know, they were, a lot of them were killer bands, but it was the ones trying to make that transition that this fell on their face.
Which sucks, which really sucks if you sign your deal in the late 80s. You're signing your deal, you're writing your album, and by the time you release it, bang, forget it. You know, the landscape's changed.
Before you ever get a chance,
Yeah,
we've got a lot of views about what happened in the... me and Darren especially have had a few about how it actually happened, the end of that, you know, that sort of music, the hair, if you like, or the melodic rock stuff. But we'll get onto that another day. It's an interesting subject, though, without a doubt. I've got a couple of albums being mentioned here. You might know about these, Bryan, or you might, Jonathan. So we got Carcass. They're extreme, and they Symphonies of Sickness, and Sabbath. Or is it Dreamweaver? They brought out albums that year. Apparently, Gary Mayer has mentioned those, so I don't know them, but obviously more extreme stuff, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, Obituary. Steve Mayer, my next door neighbour, has just
Slowly
said,
We Rock.
Slowly We Rock. Yeah, and Gary. I've realised who Gary is now. That's Steve's son, Creator. I remember them, Creator, Extreme Aggression, all like that thrash stuff, and that was going around at the time, wasn't it? You know, so they're still going now, Creator. I think they're producing some music now. So good shout outs, guys, for those.
Lee, you kind of have a good with your neighbours because nobody wants to live next door to a rock fan. But if they're rock fans as well, happy days.
Mate,
play as loud as you like.
Mate, the day I moved in, I walked out in the garden and I looked at my missus and I said, what's that music playing? And I was listening. I think it was Maiden or something. I went, is that Iron Maiden? I looked over the fence and my next door neighbour had like I think he had a Wacken t-shirt on, like metal festival t-shirt on. I was like, yes, come on.
Alexa, play.
Exactly. So, yeah, he's got good taste, man. He's more into the more extreme stuff as well. Yeah, so sometimes I hear like Cookie Monsters coming over the fence, you know, but apart from that, it's all right.
Well then, in that case, Lee's neighbour, you better pipe down.
Yeah, exactly.
Cut that crap out.
Our third one on the list is Mark's going to talk about this one. It's WASP and the Headless Children.
Headless Children. All right, I'm having a hard time finding where to hold it here in front of this camera, but this was the fourth WASP album. By this time, they had started to kind of mature in the songwriting, the subject matter. Lee and I had just done a WASP video last week, I think, where we talked about our favorite WASP song. When they got to this stage, Blackie started to expand the horizon as to what he would write about. The earlier WASP stuff was the more predictable sex and drugs and devil worship kind of stuff. By the time they hit this stage, he started getting a lot more political. The songwriting changed, the music got more sophisticated, with the exception of like a song Mean Man, which was written about Chris Holmes, his debauchery that he liked to indulge in. That was more like the older WASP stuff. The song Forever Free on this album, as far as I'm concerned, is the first real WASP ballad. Some people would say Sleeping in the Fire was a ballad, but it was more dark in nature than being a traditional type ballad. But anyway, this song was evidently an ode to Leonard Skinner's Freebird, which I didn't know that the other day. I was doing some research and found that reference. Anyway, real good power type ballad. The reissue of this album had 3 bonus tracks. One of them's called For Whom the Bell Tolls, which is not the same song as the Metallica song. another song called War Cry, and another song called Wake of Fools. I love these 3 songs. They actually made my list of our top songs. I actually like those songs better than anything that made it onto the official release. Why they didn't make it, I don't know. They were all great songs.
I think that the WASP, with a lot of people, will be put off because of that original image, won't they? But man, Blackie Lawless has got a great voice now as well, and what an amazing voice he's got, and
killer singer,
absolutely brilliant. And he has brought out some really, they're not all about the people. Probably just see him, wouldn't they, and just think, what's that all about, and just completely ignore them because of the way they looked and all that. But man, that last album, I know we're not talking about now, but that last album he brought out was pretty good and all amazing. A bit of a return to form. I think the beginning and the end of his career has been pretty good. Wasp's career has been pretty good. So, what's this up in here? Rothschild America again, from Sleep Betrays Me. So I'm not really sure what that is. So I might have to check that out. I've got it written down. So getting a couple of plugs for that. Yeah, Wasp, man. Good choice.
You know what, Lee? It's funny because, this is kind of. I think it'd be hilarious to tell somebody back in 1988 that, in 2021, the members of the singer for WASP and Dave Mustaine and these guys are going to be professing Christians, and all the members of Motley Crue will still be alive while guys like Chris Cornell and the singer for Linkin Park are dead. I mean, the irony of all this is just, it cracks me up. You know what I mean? You're right. Because who would have ever thought back in the day when he's wearing the saw blade cod piece and all that?
Oh yeah.
Someday he was going to be a professing Christian. I think that's funny.
I'll never forget. He shot the flames out of his cod piece. He used to do that, didn't he? So he had a lot of pipe coming out of his cod
They had the
piece.
chicks chained to the wall.
Yeah. It backfired on him one night. Apparently, it burnt his balls and all that. Yeah, one night he had to go to hospital. So that was quite a cool story.
Play with fire and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
I think I'd rather be Michael Jackson and have my hair burned off.
Yeah, just a bit of. That was their 4th album, actually. Just a little bit of that was one of their highest selling albums. Oh, I've got the weird cat coming now. I'm surrounded by animals here, by the way.
Yeah, so I saw the cat go flying up behind you.
Yeah, they sold 60,000, and that ain't a lot, but I mean it probably was good for them back then, But I don't know. They're not going to do it now, are they? When we say these are their highest selling albums, if they're still going now, they're not going to exceed that. That's gone them days. So we might as well just say that was it.
Do they actually sell albums anymore? I didn't know that was a thing.
Well, yeah, exactly, mate.
Yeah, I didn't know people actually bought.
They sell them to me if nobody else.
Yeah, Mark buys them.
I still do.
There's 5 people here that are still purchasing albums. Okay.
Yeah. Right, okay. We move on to the next one. We're going to the inventors of heavy metal now, Black Sabbath. So, bit of a strange time for these guys, 1989. This Headless Cross was brought out on 24th of April, 14th studio album in 1989. Apparently, there was I read about this earlier because I was trying to read up about it, and there was complaints from Tony Iommi that they could have sold a lot more, but the shops didn't stock them quick enough, apparently. I don't know if that's him just trying to make up for the bad sales. I don't know, but a great album nonetheless. Bryan, you can kick us up on this one, mate, if you want to talk about the Headless Cross.
This just happens to be my favorite Black Sabbath album with my favorite Black Sabbath singer. When I first heard it, Mark had it, and he was playing it in the car, and I said, "I've got to get this." And the very next day, I went and bought this album. It's just from start to finish, it's just great, and Even some little surprises like I believe it was Brian May has a solo on When Death Calls. Brian May's got a solo on When Death Calls, but Tony Martin just solidified it with me with his vocals. And like Mark says, he could sing the phone book and I'd be happy.
Yeah, he's a great singer, man. Underrated. Definitely underrated singer. Great singer. Mark's favourite singer. Total, isn't it, Mark?
Oh, yeah.
Favourite singer.
Where am I? Here we go.
There we go. There he goes. Get it out. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, this was the second album with Tony Martin, but the first one he actually had any writing involved with. The Eternal Idol, he came in at the very last minute and re-recorded the vocals that had originally been done by Ray Gillen. Ray had split, and the album was all but finished, other than the fact that their vocalist had just left. So at the last minute, they got Tony Martin in to re-record the vocals for Eternal Idol, and then he stuck around to record Headless Cross. So it was the first album he actually had any input in. Some interesting historical notes about the album. Headless Cross is actually the name of a town in England. I think it's near Birmingham. Back in the 1600s, the Black Plague wiped out half of the town, and the song Headless Cross was based on people praying to be spared from the plague. Supposedly there was a hill where there was a cross that had broken in half. People would go to this hill to pray to be saved from the plague. And then, of course, Tony Martin interjected the lyrics about witchcraft and, gave it more of a Sabbathy subject matter. But also, that town, when they were putting in the highway system in the 50s, the highway that stretched through that section of town, they actually had to dig up some of the mass graves where these people were buried back in the 1600s that had died from the plague. And there was a fear that if they dug these graves up, they were going to release the plague again in modern times. So it's kind of an interesting tidbit about that area.
So you don't just come here for metal, you come here for history as well. You know what I mean?
And you know what? Aside from that, like Bryan, I love the thoughts of you and Mark just cruising around listening to rock music. I want to go cruising with you guys. I need to be in that car.
Come on over.
I don't care. You can have shotgun. I'll sit in the back. I don't care. But I'm cruising with you guys. I need to go cruising. Listen, pop in the CD and let's just go. Let's just go for it. Drive around town. I love that.
Gary Mayer has just said Annihilator, Alice in Hell. Annihilator, they're a really good band now. I like Annihilator now. They produce some great music. I wasn't into them back then. Anyone into them back then in 1989? Annihilator? No, but they're a great thrash band now. They produce some great music now. So good shout out that one. Okay, we're all done on Sabbath. I know you'd never be done on Sabbath, really. But,
I was just going to say the bass player on this, his name was Lawrence Cottle. He was a session player. He didn't actually tour with him. He did appear in the Headless Cross video, but he was more of a jazz fusion type player. So his bass playing on that album gives it a sort of a different vibe than the traditional distorted bass that Geezer Butler typically used in Sabbath. But, anyway, I love that album.
And Neil Murray was the touring bassist.
Yeah. Neil Murray joined on that tour and then stayed with them for a while after that.
A lot to live up to and all, man. Like, I know Gillen was there after Dio and that, but really he gets compared to Dio, doesn't he?
Yeah.
You know, Tony Martin, straight away, because he's got that sort of sound. So everyone compares him to Dio. It's not fair, really, because Dio's the best in the world, wasn't he? He was the best. So there you go. Anyway,
but you would say that. You name your animals after him. I mean, come on.
I know. Okay, we're on to number 5, and Blue Murder, self-titled album. So Mark and Bryan again on this one, Blue Murder. So tell us a little bit about this one, guys. Who wants to go on this one? Oh, he's got the album. Of course he has. Look, hold it up. Let's have a look.
He's had all of them so far, I think.
I didn't look to see when it was released as far as the date or anything like that. Brian may have that information.
Yeah, I got
April
that. 24th. Yeah, 24th. Yeah.
Originally, Blue Murder was intended to be a 4-piece, and Ray Gillen, Blue Murder is highly, what's the word I'm looking for? Connected, I guess, to Black Sabbath.
Yes.
Ray Gillen, when he left Sabbath, he left to join John Sykes in Blue Murder. So originally it was going to be Ray Gillen as the vocalist. Cozy Powell was going to be the drummer. They did some demos, but then, according to John Sykes, Ray Gillen couldn't write lyrics. So Gillen left. Tony Martin steps in. This was between Eternal Idol and Headless Cross. Tony Martin stepped in, wrote some lyrics, and was intended to join Blue Murder. He ended up staying with Sabbath instead, but if you listen to the song Valley of the Kings by Blue Murder, Tony Martin gets a co-writing credit. Some of the same lyrics in that song Valley of the Kings were reused on Headless Cross in the song Black Moon. No, I'm sorry, not Black Moon, Devil and Daughter. So if you listen to those two songs, there's a lyric that says 1,000 times over, you'll hear it in the wind. That same set of lyrics is in Valley of the King and Blue Murder, and also Devil and Daughter and Sabbath. And also These Sinners Never Sinned was also used in both songs. So there's definitely a Sabbath connection there. But anyway, after Tony went on back to Sabbath, it was decided that John Sykes would do the vocals himself. So they ended up being a 3-piece. Sykes handled vocals and guitar, Tony Franklin on bass, and by this time Carmen Appice had come in as drummer. But yeah, I love this album. They're highly underrated.
Yeah.
I got to see them back in the day. They actually opened for Bon Jovi of all people.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him open for Quiet Riot.
Blue Murder did.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it had great reviews, but didn't do very well. You know, it didn't sell much.
They were stuck in that, that limbo time between, the late '80s and early '90s, and unfortunately, it didn't last long enough for them.
Anything on that one, Bryan?
Yeah. Little Mountain Sound in Vancouver, British Columbia, in Canada, and Bob Rock around this time, who produced the album. You'll see that name, or those two names, Little Mountain Studios and Bob Rock, on a lot of albums during this time.
Oh, okay.
Bob Rock produced a lot of great music.
Oh,
and this being one of them. Did
the Metallica album, didn't he? Black Album.
Black Album. Yeah. He changed production, like he really did. He changed it. And everything was just massive sounding on his. I'm
gonna go ahead and mention that out since you mentioned the Black Album. It was because of Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood.
Dr. Feelgood, yeah. The
way that album was produced, Lars Ulrich got in touch with Bob Rock to have him do their album.
Mm-hmm.
Great sounding album. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
That's the best thing about Dr. Feelgood was the production.
Mm-hmm.
It just the wall of sound that came out just right as that album opened, just boom. It was obvious that they had kicked it into a different gear production wise.
Yes.
Sorry, Mike, go on.
I was going to say, after doing some research, they Blue Murder, the album was great, it should have gotten, MTV, because Valley of the Kings didn't do so well as far as reviews were concerned. The song Jelly Roll, or the video Jelly Roll, never got played. And it's chalked up to some mismanagement issues, some internal things going on that they didn't achieve the popularity that could have happened. I'm not saying should have happened, but because that's my opinion. But
I'll say it should have happened.
Well,
there you go.
Well, it's more than talent. It's more than production. It's more than writing. Mm-hmm. It's just plain luck sometimes, and it just either happens or it doesn't.
Yeah, by the time they
can have all the talent in the world.
Yeah. By the time they changed their managers before going on tour, they fired them and hired someone else, and they said it was just too late then. So, wish they could have carried on.
Yeah, definitely. Great album. Very bluesy again. You know what I mean? That album, great guitar work from John Sykes. There's
always
Dommy saying John Sykes was amazing. Yeah. I got Mark 199.
Sorry, just on that. Dommy is a pal of mine.
All right.
She's one of my friends, and she is the biggest metal fan you will ever meet, and she knows her stuff. So, good comment from Dommy.
Well, she knows her stuff about John Sykes. That's without.
He knows her stuff. Yeah,
absolutely amazing guitarist. I wish we heard more from him, though. That's the only thing I would say at the moment. We're all waiting in anticipation. You've got about one song in about 10 years or something. That's about it. There you go. We got just a few suggestions from people. I don't know if anyone knows these. Just shout if you do. Vain, No Respect. Anyone heard of Vain before? No?
I've heard of them, but I don't remember them at all.
No, and I've heard of this band, but I've never listened to their music. Dan Reed Network brought an album out. I've heard of them, but I haven't heard any of the music. And that's Mark 199 mentioned him. And Fire Burns Within has mentioned Running Wild. They're a lot of power metal sort of band, aren't they?
I remember.
Death or Glory. They brought out Death or Glory. So there you go. Thanks very much for those suggestions. But remember, if you've suggested any and I've skipped over them, it's probably because they're going to come a bit later. So next up, we have a bit similar to Blue Murder. I think it might have some connections. Badlands, did they have connections to Blue Murder? So we got Jonathan. You can kick us off with this one if you want, mate. Badlands.
When you suggested doing this, as soon as you said, what year, I mean, that was the first thing that came. You probably remember it was the first thing that came to my mind because this album, I believe, struck the right note at the right moment in the right time. Didn't blow up critically, or commercially, but man, if it didn't influence a whole lot of players coming after it. Obviously, you got Ray Gillen singing, probably doing the best vocal work of his career on this record. The second album, Voodoo Highway, it was good, but this album, man, was just pure magic from start to finish. Obviously, Jakey Lee from Ozzy got let off, the leash and got to do what he wanted to do and just show a whole different side of his playing. And, man, it literally brings up everything from probably his childhood on. I mean, it's got bits of Zeppelin, Sabbath. I mean, there's everything all thrown into blender in this thing, but it is just raunchy and raw, and it sounds like it was produced in the late 70s. The guy that Paul O'Neill produced it, and he's known more for, at that point in time, more extreme music, working with a bunch of extreme bands. And for him to do this record and it to sound so classic, I mean, it's very raw, very edgy, smoky sounding from beginning to end production-wise, which really favored the music in an era when everybody was overproducing and polishing the hell out of stuff till, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like there were vocal layers, 15 miles thick, and, everybody was kind of starting that transition over to digital. So everything was very, very clean sounding. They got that stank and that smoke back on the music that was from the late 70s, and it just worked on this record. And the songwriting was amazing. I think Jake did probably some of his best guitar playing of his entire career on this album. like I said, showed a whole different side of his playing, but I think it was more who he really is as a player.
Yeah.
Ray Gillen, what can you say about that guy's voice? I don't know how many lyrics he wrote on that record, because you just said that he kind of had the accusation about not writing lyrics, but the songs on this album are just hook heavy and just, you just want to keep going back and listen to it over and over. And for me, man, I lived on this. I wore it out for probably 2 years, and it changed the way that I looked at music a bit. Because I started out, very progressive, melodic metal, more in that Queensryche type of vein. I was a huge fan of Stryper. Everybody knows that. But, just more the dual guitar attack, the big polish, the big production, huge choruses and stuff. And this album really just kind of drove a stake in the ground back into that. If it does not make your head bob, if it doesn't make you want to sing along, that became my standard for everything I did. No matter how heavy the music got, that had to be achieved, Yeah. And, this album had, a lot to do with that for me. That was a big transition time for me because I was kind of making that transition from what I grew up on, which was the hair metal stuff and all that, into what was happening, with the grunge era and all. And this album helped me kind of make a transition in my writing, not towards grunge, but towards writing music that was seriously groove heavy, that, not overproduced. That was huge as a developmental process for me as a producer. It just stuck with me how these guys really achieved not underproducing, but adequately producing for the sound of the music. And not a whole lot of bands were doing that at the time. Everybody was kind of trying to polish it, So I just really feel like overall, man, this is probably in my top 20 all-time rock albums, for sure.
And Mark also put his hand up for this one. And also you got Dommy, your friend Dommy, Darren, loves Badlands apparently. So there you go. But Mark, you love this, and I like this album as well. It's great, absolutely great.
It's when you think about it, Badlands basically rose from the ashes of that version of Sabbath that featured Ray Gillen and Eric Singer, and that version of Ozzy's band that featured Jake. So that crumbled, that version of Sabbath crumbled, and from those ashes, this amazing album.
Heck yeah.
It's amazing that it turned out as good as it did.
Yeah, it's a masterpiece. It is. I think that's a hard rock masterpiece.
And I'm going to be a bit controversial now. My favourite Aussie guitarist as well, Jake Ely.
Oh, mine by far. Plus a really cool guy. I met him. I got the pleasure of meeting him one time. Just super. Right. It was right after Ray died. Super humble, super cool dude. Gave me a big hug. Like put the squeeze on me. He just, because I had told him what he'd meant to me as a player and how it helped me form my playing style. I mean, if you listen closely to my playing, you're going to hear a lot of Jake in there, especially my lead playing and stuff. And, just one of my favorite guitarists all time. Definitely the best Aussie guitarist. And I say that with much respect for the other guys. I believe, I've always said this, I believe Zakk Wylde is a perfect hybrid of Jake and Randy, with a little bit of his own, stuff in there, but I think he's a hybrid of the two of them. He definitely represents the best of both of them. But I found it really interesting that when Zakk went to do his first solo material, it didn't sound like Badlands, but definitely had the chemistry and the vibe of a Badlands and the Pride and Glory stuff that he did. He definitely went more for that groovy, stanky, smoky vibe. So he was kind of following, Jake's lead in that respect, I think.
I think Zakk Wylde's really good, man, but too much of the wow all the time.
Popping the pick harmonics all the time.
Yeah, just a bit too much. Just calm down a little bit, but he is great.
Well, that was the thing that he brought. That was his unique element. The other stuff is Jake and Randy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you listen to what he's playing, his playing style, his leads, they are a hybrid between Jake and Randy. And the one thing that he brought to it was that over-aggressive picking style and popping those pick harmonics in and out of there. So,
definitely. Great album, man. Absolutely brilliant album. Okay. We're moving on to June now. I haven't actually got a date for this. There wasn't a date it was released, but me and Darren's chose this one. So Darren's going to talk about this one. And we've gone a bit softer now. You know, not so much metal now.
That's why I'm talking this time.
Exactly. But I love it as well. And we're talking that super group, Bad English, brought out their self-titled album.
So
there you go then. Go on, mate.
So here's the deal. So Dommy's watching, right? So every Friday, Dommy and I send each other a couple of tunes. We call it the Friday tune, email, right? Back and forth. Here's my tunes. When I first got to know Dommy, we started working together 3 years ago. I'd send it. We got to know each other like rock down in the canteen. So we came up with this Friday tune thing. I'd send her bands like Bad English, and she'd send me back Black Sabbath, right? So this, so I'd be embarrassed. Dommy would send me all the cool stuff, and I'm sending her the AOR, But anyway, so Bad English. It's, as you said, it's a super group. It's like Bad English is the love child. It's an incestuous love child of Journey and the Babies, right? Effectively. So I actually had a look at it today, where you could actually maybe draw the family tree of this, right? So you got John Waite, you got John Cain, and you got Ricky Phillips from the Babies. But then you've got John Cain and Neil Sean from Journey, obviously come together. And then you've got Dean Castronovo. I love Dean Castronovo, man. We've talked about it a few times. You've got Dean Castronovo on drums, who joined Journey about 10 years later. So it is a super group, as you said, Lee. But I don't know if you guys would agree. It's its own thing. It's not Journey or the Babies, really. It's more
unique. Yeah, very unique.
Yeah. First two LPs they had in this project. First one's the best one, which is the one we're talking about now, the self-titled album. I have to laugh though at the sleeve cover. The
hair was. John White. What happened to John White's hair?
Forget that. What about Neil Sean and Jonathan Kent? It doesn't suit them. They're trying to go for this thing of the time, and you're looking at going, guys, you're not. It's almost a hair metal kind of vibe off the cover, isn't it? It doesn't sit well with these. Dean Castronovo could pull it off. But the rest of them, I'm not feeling it. But Mark, what would you say this is? Is this? It's definitely rock, but is it glam rock? What would you say, Mark?
No, it's AOR, isn't it? It's AOR, but it's melodic. I would say it's melodic heavy rock for me.
Yeah, I'd call it hard rock. I mean, not to the stage of, obviously not metal, but it's definitely a little heavier than Journey for the most part, I would say.
Yeah.
Not as heavy as Neil and Dean later went with Hardline.
Yes. Yeah. Agreed.
Somewhere in the middle.
Having said that, I think Neil Sean probably enjoyed this because he's in a new band now and he doesn't have to listen to Steve Perry's whining. We're kicking these out of the band and we're doing it. You know me, Mark. I love Steve Perry, favorite singer of all time, but man, he was a nag towards the end of Journey, wasn't he? He wanted people out of the band. He wanted to go into an R&B direction. So if you're Sean coming into Bad English, that you can kind of do your thing and stretch your legs a little bit with that. But when I look at the album itself, because the album we're talking about, it's almost like a licorice all sorts of everything, isn't it? You've got harder tracks, guitar solos, ballads, synth, keys. Kind of have a bit of everything on this album. But I would say, though, I think it's a bit long for me. I don't know what you guys, we can nearly go around the house on this, but anything over an hour on an album for me is too long. I'm just personally, I've always said this, I like a 3/4 of an hour album, 45 minutes. This one has, I think it's 12 tracks, 13 tracks. You could shave it down to 10 for me, personally, but overall I love this album. That's why I said to you, Lee, we should throw this on this list because
I love it. I absolutely love this album, man. I mean, every ballad on here is just brilliant, absolutely brilliant,
stunning.
My missus walked into When I See You Smile on our wedding day last year, which was really cool.
Cool.
Yeah, and a couple of the other songs we chose as we're signing the register and that, it was straight away, we both thought we've got to have Bad English. We absolutely love them. Funny enough, I don't like John Waite on his own at all.
I agree.
But in this band,
he's better here. You're right. He's better on this.
Yeah, I mean, for some reason, I don't get along with his vocals, when I hear him singing solo. But on this, it must have just been the music and him together was just absolutely perfect. Man, one of my favourite albums, actually. Great production, really nice and crisp as it should be. That sort of music you want to hear. You want to hear everything. Great drum sound. Could have been done a couple of years ago. Just absolutely amazing album. I love it.
And achieved something Journey couldn't, a #1 single.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Which is interesting when you think of Journey's back catalogue, and then they go and leave Journey and create this band and get a #1 single with the song that you're saying from your wedding, Lee. Which is incredible. I'll just name a couple of other tracks quickly that I pulled out of it as well. Possession, which is a ballad as well, really good track, and the promotional single from it, Best of What You Got, is a tune. I was dancing around, taking things out of the dishwasher today, and my missus told me to turn the music down, to that song. Absolutely class. Best of What You Got.
I watched if anyone's watching this, or you guys, when you come off, you got the Price of Love video is a classic as well.
Yeah.
John Waite on, I think it's an open top bus or something with a leather jacket on. It's just amazing. Absolutely amazing. We got a couple of people mention albums here. I remember this band, Cloven Hoof. This was from Fire Burns Within. They're like a new wave of British heavy metal type band. A Sultan's Ransom. One that you like, Darren. Fire Burns Within have also mentioned Signal, Loud and Clear.
I have it on my. I actually have that on my honourable mentions later on.
Oh, right. Sorry, mate. But Mark Free was Mark Free, now Marcy Free.
I've done a video on that on my channel myself, Lee. I put Strange Ways, Walk in the Fire, and Signal as one video and went into a bit of depth on that. So two cool AOR albums, that.
Definitely. And Mark 199, Faster Pussycat. Wake Me When It's Over. They came out at the same time as Guns N' Roses and stuff like that, didn't they? So yeah, some good mentions there, guys. They're from the ones. Sorry about that, Darren. I forgot about Signal being on your list, but
I'll go, mate. All good.
Okay, so number 8 of our albums, bit of thrash metal, Testament. Practice What You Preach. Jonathan, do you want to talk about this for a little while, mate?
No, not really.
Oh, I will then. Oh, look, cassette. He's got a cassette. Hold on, watch. Look at Mark.
I had the cassette. Yeah.
Look at that. Hey.
I'm sorry, guys, but Lee, where the fuck does he keep them? He's so much cassettes.
Hey, man, I got to get your email address because you're the one guy still buying stuff.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I have this impression that Mark and his wife just live outside in the shed, and the whole house is just taken up with his
full.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Oh, wow, that's great. No, man, what can you say about Testament, man? I mean,
oh man, they're brilliant.
Those guys, man. Obviously they were way influenced by what happened with Metallica. I mean, by their own admission. But just that whole San Francisco Bay Area thrash movement that came out, man, they just came to the top. They just carved out their own niche of thrash metal that's unique to them. And the one thing that really stands out for me as a musician listening to Testament, I mean, there are lots of things that stand out. You got killer guitars, killer drums, really good, decipherable, just angry enough vocals with just enough melody to keep it interesting. It's not so overall thrashy and growly that the melodic cats like us that grew up listening to the melodic stuff didn't dig it. So, they just had a perfect blend of things. But the thing that really jumps out to me about Testament's sound is their dual guitar work. The way that those two guys played rhythms together was unique in thrash. They would just pull out these riffs and they would harmonize the riffs. So unlike Metallica, there's they're just playing the riff together. These guys would be playing these single note thrashy riffs with this cross picking pattern, but they would be harmonizing the notes. And they've never gone away from that in their entire career. They have kept that, and it's made them unique in the genre, I think, that they just have these awesome harmonizing riffs, in almost every song.
Sorry, mate, that album, I listened to it again the other day. I mean, I didn't listen to Testament much when I was younger. but I've listened to a lot of their newer stuff now. So I went back to listen to Practice What You Preach. That's like I don't know, like you said, very Metallica, but those riffs as well, like something like off Among the Living by Anthrax, some of those real heavy, driving, like groovy riffs. Excellent band, man. Absolutely
I mean,
brilliant.
they had, you know, the formula of putting some mellow sections into the music and then coming out of it. See, that's the thing where a lot of these thrash bands failed. The ones that I call the second tier, you know, thrash and extreme metal bands, they would just be extreme the whole time. And they didn't have the dynamics of a Metallica early in their career. And I think the reason why the first few Metallica albums are masterpieces is because of the dynamics. And I honestly think that Cliff Burton brought a lot of that to Metallica.
Yeah.
You know, because of his music degree, you know, background and all that. But they would just flow out of these pristine, beautiful, you know, clean guitar sections into just sheer brutality, you know, just in a second. And Testament picked up that. And I think they gleaned that from Metallica. And, you know, they are masters of doing that. But, you know, like I said, I think the thing that really made them unique in the genre was the way that they played their riffs, their rhythms especially. You know, all the songs had groove. No matter how heavy they were, they had groove. You know, and that the head bobbing thing, it's important. You know, if you can't make somebody's head bob, you've not grabbed them. You know, so now in critical appraisal of this album, I did not like the production of this record.
No, very
honestly. The album sounds like they were trying to go for a more overproduced sound, and it just has no raw edge to it. So it's one of the things that still bothers me listening to it, probably now more so, that it doesn't have that anger in the production. There's not the dirt. There's not the it just kind of lost that. It's almost like they went digital, and it's almost like they had a pop producer producing the album. Alex Perales, I guess.
Perales,
yeah. He's done it, you know, Overkill, Anthrax, SOD, Nuclear Assault, a bunch of bands. I just don't feel he got that raw thrash sound out of this record. So I listen to it now and I just think how much better of a record it would have been if it was just raw. You know, they just recorded it live. Even the vocals, they were using weird vocal effects and stuff, almost digitized sound and vocal effects, and lots of big delays, and just something you would just hear in, you know, pop music or something. It just kind of rubs me the wrong way listening to it. But song-wise, man, it's such a killer record. Had some really nice instrumental stuff on there as well. You know, just open instrumental sections. They would let the songs breathe. Just great stuff. And what can you say about, you know, Alex Kolnick's playing? He's just a great lead player. Both of them are, but his, you know, to me, he's just, you know, he's the linchpin that holds that thing together. But such a great record, you know, and it did, you know, it kind of cemented them, you know, in their place at the top, you know. And as you know, I've become friends with Greg Christian, the bass player from Testament. Has some really interesting, you know, stories, road stories when they were touring, you know, the Titans tour and all that stuff, and the big LA riot that happened there where they tore the arena apart, and him having to escape through the crowd, walking through the crowd. Nobody recognized him. He said there were chairs and like cushions flying everywhere, and him and his girlfriend were sneaking out through the middle of it and stuff. But yeah, just I've always loved Testament. And the thing that's really impressive about Testament is they're just keeping it going at a high level. You know, their albums still sound great, you know, still have that raw energy. It's not stale feeling. You know, they've had a few duds in there that weren't as good as others, but, you know, Brotherhood of the Snake, some of the more recent albums are just killer, you know. And
last four have been, I think it's the last four have been absolutely fantastic.
Really good.
Probably my favourites from them. So really going strong, man. Totally right there. Great band. Absolutely. I'm glad we got a bit of thrash on there, though, because they are very melodic, though. If everyone's thinking thrash is all about noise, it definitely ain't. It definitely ain't. Just a shout out from Claire Beth, your friend, Darren, saying Sleeve Saturday is a brilliant channel. I totally agree. Everyone should check out Sleeve Saturday.
She is biased. That is my sister.
Hey, at least your sister likes you. That's more than I can say for a lot of people I know.
She's a legend. She's a legend. I love her.
Cool. Excellent. A few other people have mentioned albums that we're actually going to mention a little bit later on honorable mentions, but that's cool. We're on to the biggest album seller next of this whole lot, these 10 we're talking about. We had actually mentioned a little bit already. Motley Crue, Dr. Feelgood. So, Bryan, do you want to have a little go on this one?
Yeah, Motley Crue released on September 1st, 1989. It was recorded at Little Mountain Studio, Vancouver, British Columbia. And like I said before, produced by Bob Rock. This is their 5th studio album. It is their top selling. They sold 6 million copies plus. And that's their best selling album and highest ranking album according to Billboard ever, and nothing since. I see this album as the farewell to glam and hair metal, because after that, it was gone. And, and after this album, they didn't record another album with Vince Neil until 97 with Generation Swine. So this is just, for me, like I said, as a farewell to glam, hair metal, whatever you want to call it. Some interesting tidbits of this: when it was being recorded in Vancouver, Aerosmith's Pump was being recorded at the same time. So Steven Tyler's got some background vocals on Sticky Sweet, along with Bryan Adams, who also lived in Vancouver at the time.
That's cool.
That is cool.
That's really cool.
I knew Darren would like that.
That's another.
I love that. You know what? I actually have Pump on my honorable mentions, but I didn't know that. So that's really cool.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they knew each other from their debauchery days, and this album was done after everybody was clean and sober, and it was a testament to what was going on. I mean, there's a whole lot of interesting stuff from the album cover, how it was conceived, all the way through each song. I could go on forever, but we don't have that much time. Like the album cover, they were going to have their mascot, Alistair Fiend, who was introduced during Shout at the Devil, and they were hoping he would kind of gather a cult following like Eddie from Iron Maiden. Yeah. But it never went that way. The album cover they had was Alistair Fiend as a crazed doctor holding a huge syringe over his head, but that kind of hit too close to home for Nicky, since he was a heroin addict, and that changed that. And they got their tattoo artist. If I can, I got that over here. Kevin Brady was a tattoo artist at the time at Sunset Strip Tattoo, who did the artwork, and the illustrator of Master of Puppets, Dan Braylington, I believe it. They handled the artwork for the album cover. Once again, I said it topped the Billboard 200 as far as songs go, like Dr. Feelgood. There we go.
For all you younger cats, that's a cassette. Yeah, in fairness, Bryan, Motley Crue would never have a mascot because they were their own mascot. If ever a band was their own mascot, they were.
Yes.
Mark, sorry, let's just chip in. Mark 19 makes quite a good comment here. I personally hate the term hair metal. I do as well, as it's pretty disrespectful. I don't think he's having a go at us. I think he's just saying in general. I think the 80s were an awesome decade for rock music. Totally agree there. And right up there with the 70s, but it doesn't get the respect it deserves. I mean, it does for me. The 80s was just, man, that's when I grew up, and I don't know. I think it's a lot of the time it is all about that. It's when you're growing up. And I'm sure, apart from Darren's probably the youngest one on here. I don't know. You are, aren't you?
Yeah, I don't know.
I reckon you look the youngest anyway. So, I think it's a lot to do with when you grow up, isn't it? Mm-hmm. When you get into music. But he's right. Hair metal, I label things too much, but it's when you want to try and explain something, you have to say a certain thing, don't you? You know, you can't go around just saying everything's metal, because I'd spend all my time listening to shit I don't want to listen to. I have to find out what that actual is. And I know hair metal probably isn't a good term, but it's there, isn't it, to be used. You know
Lee, what's the name of the guy that made that comment? Sorry,
Mark 199.
Mark 199. I agree with you, right? I agree that hair metal is, for want of a better word, a derogatory term to bands of that time. But as Lee says, sometimes you've just got to be able to illustrate what you're saying. And let's face it, the majority of people know it as that, you know. But I do agree. I don't like the term. Yeah, I do. Even though I use it. Yeah.
Honestly,
I mean, you could say glam, couldn't you? But then you could be talking about blimmin' stuff in the 70s. You know,
you could be talking about Disco Kiss, you know, I mean.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting. Like, you know, I honestly think the hair metal tag was something that was given during the grunge era to kind of describe what they had destroyed. You know what I mean? It was like, it was hair metal, you know, and I think it did start out more as a derogatory term, because up until that point, it was just called 80s metal. It was 80s metal, you know, and I think now we subclassify everything. You know, we've got 50 different subclassifications for just extreme metal, you know, thrash, black, whatever, you know, and people are like, do you like black metal? I'm like, what is that? You know, it's like, I've been told this is black metal and that's black metal. You know, it's like, what is this stuff? To me, it's this metal, and it's either more extreme or more melodic. So I think probably melodic metal or melodic 80s metal would probably to describe, you know, the hair metal scene better than anything. But I do think it was derogatory to begin with.
Agree, Jonathan. You're absolutely right, particularly with the description of how it came into play in the early 90s with grunge stuff. Lee, I don't mean to slow it down, but just on the second point that he made around 80s music doesn't get the respect it deserves. Was that the point, Mark?
Yeah. Made? Yeah, I think it's probably just about that itself. I mean, I think
I have an opinion on that, right? So I done a review on Def Leppard's Hysteria, and what I said in that review was, yes, Def Leppard won't get new music played on the radio. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen now. Look at the Grammys a couple of nights ago. It's ridiculous, right? Yeah. It's not going to happen now. But great rock music is great rock music, right? And when Def Leppard played with Journey, and they sold out a stadium tour in 2018. And people weren't there for the nostalgia. They were there because great rock music is great rock music. Just because radio won't play it, it's radio that won't give it the respect. But let's face it, the general public will, because they'll fill giant stadium to watch these
bands. I saw Foo Fighters on their last tour before, you know, the epidemic we're dealing with. And, you know, the stadium is full to the rafters, you know. And the thing about Foo Fighters is they're a great hard rock band. They're not a grunge band. They're not a metal band. They're just a great hard rock band, you know, and doing what hard rock bands have always done, putting on great live shows. And Dave Grohl went to the microphone, he said, and he pointed at the crowd and he said, "Who says rock and roll is dead?" And the place just went nuts.
Absolutely.
You know, and they're still packing out places. So as much as they've tried to kill rock and hard rock and metal, they're not doing it. I mean, there's still people that, you know, we're being told what to believe in so many different areas of life, and music is one of them. And we're trying to be programmed to have an affinity for music that costs nothing to make. That's really what it's about, because the labels aren't making any profits anymore because of downloading. So they've created all these genres of music that 5 guys are making in their basement on their laptop or whatever, and they're just creating personalities to sing to these songs that these handful of writers are you know, creating, because it's creating profits for the labels, because they're not having to pay whole bands and the royalties and you know the publishing and all that they've had to pay in the past 2 bands. And rock music, it's expensive to make, you know, because you have to do it organically. It has to be recorded with a band, with live musicians. You have multiple writers sometimes. So it's really you know, the bean counters and stuff that have decided we're going to create styles of music and force feed it to people, and that's what's happening.
That's a great point, and that's a great point. And the point is that, as you said, you're being force fed what to believe in terms of music. Just because the Grammys won't acknowledge it, they barely acknowledged Eddie Van Halen at the Grammys a couple of nights ago. Just because they won't play, and just because the radio won't play, and just because MTV don't want to show anything else but reality TV shows.
They don't want to validate it.
That's irrelevant. The point is, they're not filling out stadiums like you said, Jonathan. The Foo Fighters or Journey or the let's say quote unquote legacy bands. They're not filling out stadiums simply for nostalgia. They're filling it out because their music is great. So when Mark says that it's underrated by people who don't actually even matter. The public show up to see them.
Yep. Yeah. Very true.
Good points, guys. Thanks, Mark 199. I just said thanks for bringing up a great subject, actually. Because some good points made there, guys. We're moving on to our last Motley Crue, by the way. I love that album. Not my favourite from them, but I do love that album. And I must say, congratulations for them for in 1989 for having such a success and their best album. Do you know what I mean? Their most successful one. 6 times platinum in the US, as you said, Bryan. 3 times platinum in Canada, and went gold in the UK as well. So. Huge album, and in 1989 that was probably a bit of a feat then. You know what I mean? It was changing. So the last one on our list is probably a bit more obscure, I suppose, but Loudness, Soldier of Fortune. So Mark, you kick us off for this one. Oh, look, of course, there it is. There it is.
This was the 8th Loudness studio album. And the first with the American singer, Mike Vescara. He had come from a band called Obsession previously to this, and later went on to play with Yngwie Malmsteen. But he did 2 albums with Loudness, the first being Soldier of Fortune. I've mentioned on your show many times my admiration for Akira Takasaki.
Oh, heck yeah, bro. One of the greatest of that era.
Level
does not get the respect he deserves.
No, not at all. So overlooked. But anyway, the idea was to broaden their audience. I think they were trying to broaden their American audience by getting rid of the Japanese singer Minoru Nihara and bringing in a English-speaking American singer, and turned out 2 great albums with him. I didn't have a problem with the previous singer. His accent wasn't that thick to warrant, I didn't think, the change. But anyway, I like both eras equally well. Every song on this album is amazing as far as I'm concerned. It sounds a little bit more like the traditional American metal at the time for obvious reasons. But yeah, they eventually went back to their original singer many years later. But yeah, this was a great album that should have put them on the map, but unfortunately didn't seem to help their sales too much.
Jonathan, you chose this one as well, mate?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I agree with everything Mark said. I believe that they kind of went more for the American audience. Problem was like the American audience knew who Loudness was, and liked them the way they were. And I don't think that they weren't gonna add any more fans by having an American singer. I think in a way they might have shot themselves in the foot. I don't think these albums were as but commercially successful as their previous ones. And that's probably why they went back to their original lineup. Mike Becerra is a great singer, just absolute. And he fit very well with this band's sound. They didn't really miss a beat because his voice wasn't that much different from their first singer. But melody-wise, they had some huge hooks on this record. I mean, some big songs, man, just big, giant hooks. Mark said something about, it kind of had more of the sound of what was going on at the time in America. I think that's more production, because if you listen to the song structures, the things that made Loudness, the way the guy, would form his chords, he did a lot of inversion of his chord patterns and stuff. Just had a very unique way of playing his rhythms. And obviously his lead playing was just was stellar. He had Akira Takasaki had such a great ability to cross the neoclassical and the bluesy in one phrase. Like he would fly in and out of an arpeggio sweep and then go into blues bends, and it's just bizarre, but he did it flawlessly. Just such a very clean player in his lead playing, but man, had such a unique rhythm playing style. And one of the things I think gets overlooked with Loudness is the rhythm section. Yeah. Their drummer and their bass player are maniacs, man. They would just lock in together. And as far as musicianship goes, I don't think that there was a better band in the quote-unquote hair band era. I don't think there was a better band of musicians out during that whole era than this band. I think at a musician level, they had top-notch players on every instrument. Dudes that had they been, American, Anglo-Saxon men, probably would have been one of the top bands in the world. I say that they would have been, every bit as popular as Rat. It's just, I see that in a lot of sectors. I'm personally a fan of black metal singers or hard rock singers, and I think those bands don't get the level of recognition of the four white guy band, if that makes any sense. And I don't know why that is. I don't necessarily know that it's prejudice as much as maybe the labels don't put their best into these bands because they're assuming prejudice, if that makes any sense. So they're not getting the budgets and the marketing push and all that because they're just assuming that a Japanese band couldn't be one of the most popular bands in America. But it's possible for an American band to be the most popular band in Japan. So why wouldn't it work the opposite way other than, the labels working against that end? Mm-hmm. And I know that Loudness was on Atco, right? They were a Japanese label.
Yeah.
So obviously, just from that point, they were already, a couple steps behind, the American marketing machine. So they were probably having to depend on outsourcing a lot of stuff to American labels as far as marketing and such back then. So, but this album, a very well produced record for the time. Max Norman produced it. And, Max Norman, I don't think anybody here is ignorant of his work, with Ozzy. Everybody under the sun he's worked with. But I think he actually did one of my favorite, albums, the Wicked Sensation Lynch Mob record, which I think is a great production.
Love that album.
I've always loved that production, for that time. He did that one as well, which sounds completely different than this one. But he did a good job of polishing these guys up, but not polishing them too much that they didn't sound like Loudness anymore. So I think production-wise, they had more of that American polish that was happening at the time. But song-wise, man, it would any of these songs would have fit on Lightning Strikes or Thunder in the East or any of the earlier American released albums. And I think Mike Becerra worked very well with him. I just don't think that the Loudness fan base, took to him as much as they did the original singer. It's hard to replace an original singer in a band with another guy, no matter how good he is, if he's not the original guy. When people have gotten used to that chemistry,
another almost impossible.
It's very, very rare to see that happen. Point in fact, John Corabi with Motley Crue. I think that the album he did with Motley Crue is their best album. I think that is a monster album. It just it represented great music, great production, everything that you want out of a hard rock metal album. But nobody was going to accept him singing for Motley Crue. They should have named it something else. I think had they done that, that album would have went platinum. But because they named it Motley Crue, everybody was like, "Oh heck no, I'm not taking this."
Good point.
So I think Loudness probably suffered that a bit. I don't think they had the success with this guy that they'd had before. And I think they reunited with the original lineup in 2001. And they had the original lineup together until 2008 when the drummer died from cancer. And I think they've replaced the drummer since then. But they went back to the original players and stuff for that run. I think they did 7 albums after Mike Becerra left the band. So very prolific band. But yeah, I honestly think that had this band had what a lot of the American bands had, they could have been, Rat in that kind of level of respect, because they very much had the songs for it and the guitar playing and the musicianship and And this record shows us monster hooks. I mean, just one after the other.
Lee, it's fascinating hearing a music fan like Mark and a musician like Jonathan just bounce off each other and just talk about that. The analysis is really cool. Enjoying that. I do have one question though, Mark. Do you keep all of them records in alphabetical order?
I did before I got hooked up with Lee.
His house is a library. Just walk in the shelf, the card catalog by the door.
Yeah, he said to me the other day his albums are everywhere now since he's been doing the shows with us. his albums are just sprayed across.
He's got to get them out. Yeah,
I bet his missus gets the right up with me. I bet she does.
No, seriously, though, it's cool. It's cool hearing the guys talk about it from two different angles.
I agree.
I just want to echo what he just said about the musicianship. We've said that before about Stryper. If Stryper had been a secular band, I mean, the musicianship was like Loudness, head and shoulders above a lot of the bands that blew up and huge. If Stryper had been a secular band, and if Loudness had been an American band, they would have been two of the biggest bands on the planet. I mean, their talent, musicianship was just, you can't fault it at all. It's just,
Agreed. Just before we move on to the honourable mentions quickly, I just got one from Declan Byrne who says Giant, Last of the Runaways. Giant. Now they've got an album coming out, I think, this year. They're on Frontiers as well. They're a real good melodic hard rock band. Haven't heard a lot. Yeah,
they were made up of members of a contemporary Christian rock band called Whiteheart, if I remember right. Back in that era, it was like half of the members from that band went and did a secular project, and that ended up being Giant.
Cool, excellent. So good chat out there, Declan. Right, so we're going to do the honourable mentions, but I've got them written down here in case you guys haven't brought them with you. But we just want to cut the lines on what you think of these ones. We're not going to go into detail like we have with our list, with our proper list, but just to cut the lines on, guys, what you think of these albums, that you've put as your honourable mention. So Mark first, So Mark, Kiss, Hot in the Shade.
Yeah, not my favorite Kiss album by any stretch, but they were fully entrenched in that 80s pop metal kind of vibe at the time.
Hair metal.
Yeah, hair metal. I was trying to avoid using that term, but yeah.
When it came to Kiss, it was wig metal, probably.
Yeah. That's great, man.
The biggest song on that album was Forever, and Darren did a video on it, and I had known this years ago, but had forgotten. Michael Bolton, that no talent ass clown.
Don't be mean. He's a good singer.
Say what you really mean, Mark.
You had to see the movie Office Space to understand that. If you didn't see Office Space.
I've seen it. I know what you mean. Yeah,
Office Space is classic.
But anyway, it's hard to believe that he wrote a Kiss song. But not a bad album. Just, not my favorite. They definitely, the next album, Revenge, is head and shoulders above this one. There's some strong material on it.
Okay, mate. Next on your list, Macaulay Schenker Group. Save Yourself.
Yeah, this was the 6th MSG album and the 2nd with Robin McAuley. He's my favorite MSG singer, and as we've talked about before, one of my all-time favorite singers, period. I just love his voice. These two albums, and then the third one they did with him, they were more commercial sounding than what Schenker had done previously. They had a fair amount of MTV video play back in the day. Yeah, love all those albums McCauley did.
Cool. Claire's just said, Claire Beth, that's your sister, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah.
No talent arse clown. Going to call someone this at least once a day. That's good. Brilliant. Right, okay. Next one on your list, Mark. One of my favourite bands, actually, but my least favourite album from them, White Lion, Big Game.
Yeah, I've got it here somewhere, but I can't find it. Anyway.
Oh my God.
He's not got
There's
it.
a glitch in the Matrix.
It's here somewhere.
No, don't.
Anyway, this was the third album, and it's, again, not my favorite album, but it's got some good stuff on it. They had a great version of Radar Love on it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was a good version. Yeah, great video and all. Motorbikes, desert. You can't get better than that. Right.
Classic.
Next one, mate. Easy O. So now Dominic was going to be with us tonight. He couldn't make it. He's chose this one as well. So this was going to be on the 10 list, or on the main list.
This was another Japanese band. The singer for this band, Masaki Yamada, actually went on to join Loudness after Mike Becerra left. He did 5 albums with Loudness, and also the drummer for Easy O joined Loudness later on. So they were competitors back in the day, but eventually they merged. This was their second album. I like it better than the first album. Very Loudness type music. If you like Loudness, you'll like Easy O. Skid Row, actually, when Johnny Solinger was in the band, they covered the title track of this album, Fire, Fire. If you hadn't heard it, if you like Easy O, you ought to look that one up on YouTube.
Cool. And your last, I think it's your last one, mate, unless you've got any more. Great White, Twice Shy.
Twice Shy. This was the fourth album. Mark Kendall, great guitarist, very bluesy type guitarist. Doesn't get the credit he deserves. The big ballad on this one I mentioned in our ballad show, Angel Song, one of my top 5 ballads of all time. Beautiful song.
Great song.
Also a song on there called House of Broken Love that's really good, bluesy type song. Nice. I've got a couple others I'll throw out real quickly. This one, I don't know if anybody's ever heard of a band called Damien. No. They were from Ohio. They were a power metal band, very similar to Sabotage. If you like Sabotage, you'll like this album. There's a song on here called Rising Dawn that if I ever put together a favorite songs of all time list, it'll be on there.
Okay. Thanks, man. Cheers for that. All right, we're going to go with Darren.
Somebody mentioned it in your comments. White Cross.
Yeah.
Christian band. The singer sounded a lot like Stephen Pearcy. So they were kind of the Christian equivalent of Rat. And I remember going into my favorite record store back in the day, and they had a big poster on the wall. And I didn't know White Cross was a Christian band. But the poster said the lyrics of this album will change your life. And I didn't know what they meant by that. I was thinking, okay, is this something, with backmasking or, wasn't quite sure what they I bought it, not realizing it actually was a Christian band. But, it's a great album.
Cool.
To be fair, you could put that slogan on anything. If they put that slogan on a box of cereal, I'm buying it. This cereal will change your life.
I got a little personal story about White Cross. Played with them multiple times, obviously, but the second show that I ever did with Sacred Warrior, like I said, I was a 19-year-old kid. The guitar player for White Cross is very pretty amazing guitar player, and
Rex Carroll. Is it Rex
Carroll? Yeah. So he's a pretty amazing guitar player, very well known, won all kinds of awards as guitarist of the year, whatever. Just great player. That guy, we're playing north of Chicago, our second show, and it would happen to be the hometown of where those guys lived. So obviously they came out. Rex stands right in front of me. Like he's literally right in front of my monitor, right? Front and center, got his arms crossed, and he's just staring at me the whole time, just staring at me like, impress me, kid. And I'm like, oh my God, Rex Carroll's staring at me. He's giving me the stink eye the entire day. So about the first 3 songs, I was a nervous wreck. It's only my second show on tour with these guys. And he's just standing there like, yeah, what do you got that got you this gig, right? So I'm like, I'm playing, and I'd played in front of him before. Obviously, we played, my old band had played with him. But this was different. Like he was literally like the professor standing there with his arms crossed staring at me, right? So like, yeah, for about 3 songs, I was about to wet my pants, right? But then I was like, you know what, man? I got the gig. Obviously, I did something right. I deserve to be here. So I just, at that point, I just kind of drowned him out and stopped looking at him and just did what I did. But yeah, I just thought it was funny, man. He was I think he was doing it on purpose just to get in my head, and it did for about 3 songs.
Great. Excellent, man.
You see, Jonathan, you get to do it. You get to do. That's why Mark comes on, Bryan comes on, and that's why I have a channel and Lee has a channel, because we don't get to do what you do. We get to talk about music, not actually play it. So you get to live the dream, mate. You get to live the dream.
Sometimes talking about it's way more fun. Trust me. There's a lot of work.
Okay, right. We're going to go, Darren. Couple of lines on each of these, mate. Aerosmith, we already mentioned them, I think. Already Pump.
Yeah, Aerosmith, Pump. So a couple of cool singles off that. I just done a video a couple of weeks ago on Aerosmith as well. Loving an Elevator, the Grammy Award winning Janie's Got a Gun. I mean, there's a couple of good singles off that. This is the era of Aerosmith that I love. It's the album before it, Permanent Vacation. This one, Pump, and then a couple of years later they had Get a Grip. I love that era of Aerosmith, man. That late 80s, early 90s. You and Mark might look at me, who I do videos with frequently, go, of course you do, but I do. I love that. I love the crying and crazy after the later albums as well. So that album, Pump from Aerosmith, I love that. I love that record, man.
Strange Ways, mate. Bit of an obscure one. Walk in the Fire.
Strange Ways. I'll lump these both into 2 because somebody commented on it earlier on. As I said earlier, there's Strange Ways and Signal. So yeah, on the Signal record, you have, as you said, Mark Free, now Marcy Free. Two AOR masterpieces that just, you could say it to anyone and they go, what are you talking about? But in the AOR world, in the melodic rock world, these are just, like treasured albums. As I said, I've done a video on both of them. I lumped it all into one video, so you can check out my video on that, on Strange Ways, Walk in the Fire, and Signal, Loud and Clear. 2 great albums, 2 great AOR albums.
Another great AOR band next, mate. FM and Tough It Out.
FM, Tough It Out. Lee, I think YouTube is running out of space on their servers. The amount I talk about FM on your channel.
Yeah, I love FM. Though.
You're a publicist,
FM,
right?
Yeah.
Look, we've done a lot of videos on FM. Won't bore everyone with it. But the album from '89 was Tough It Out. I would say definitely listen to the Tough It Out record. And if you don't want to listen to the whole record, listen to 2 songs. Listen to Feel So Good and listen to Bad Luck. 2 absolutely fantastic tracks from that record from FM.
And just to give a quick plug, they got a live album just coming out in the next week or so, I think.
It's that album. It's the Tough It Out album, actually. Yeah, you're absolutely right. They're after re-releasing it as a live album. I was going to mention, I didn't mention it to you offline, Lee, but Mark's already brought it up. The Hot in the Shade album by Kiss, which I really love as well. So they're my honourable mentions.
Cool. Oh, you got Warrant as well, mate. Warrant? Dirty, Rotten, Filthy, Stinking Rich.
Oh, I did put on Warrant as well. Sorry, yeah. Listen to Warrant. Amazing. Love Warrant. Excellent.
Yeah. Underrated. Shame what happened to the singer as well, man. Absolutely tragedy there. So.
Agreed. Absolutely.
Okay, Bryan, unless I'm mistaken, I think you've got, obviously a lot of yours made the actual list, but you've got the Cult. Now, you would have done, this would have made the list as well if Dominic was on. This is his favourite band of all time, and this was I think it might be his favourite album of that year.
I was going to mention that one too.
Yeah. Sonic Temple.
Yeah, I got introduced to the Cult at a Whitesnake concert when they came to town.
I was getting worried then. You said a cult. I was thinking, oh my God, what's going on here? He's got introduced to a cult, you said. I was getting a bit worried then.
Yeah, I got introduced to the Cult.
Fair, what a sentence. I got introduced to them at a Whitesnake concert. I mean, I wish I could utter a sentence like that.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, they opened up for Whitesnake, and that album was just great. I mean, what can you say about it? I mean,
I think it was like a mixture, wasn't it? It was like a mixture of, because they had.
It was a great mixture of blues and rock and roll. Yeah. That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's great, man.
Very
absolutely
so.
Great album. I mean, they had their album. They had Electric before that. What was the album before Electric? What was their one before that? Because it was like they mixed both of them together. They went really like rock and roll on Electric. The one before that was more rocky, and then they sort of mixed them both up for the Sonic Temple. Great album, man. And I think I've got one for you, Jonathan. One that we haven't mentioned yet, King's X.
Oh yeah, man. I'm surprised.
Someone mentioned it in the comments as well. Someone said King's X in the comments. So,
yeah, I'm surprised that wasn't number one on everybody's list. That's just me. But the thing that's really blowing my mind is nobody mentioned Nitro. No Nitro fans here?
Is this that? What is that one with a high pitched voice?
Oh my God, they were so terrible, man. They had that Bobby Rock, the like muscle bound dude on drums. They ended up playing with that band Nelson with the Nelson Brothers, and Jim Gillette was singing. The dude who did all the vocal tapes. Remember, he put out his tape series, and then Michelangelo playing his double guitar. They were so terrible, dude. They came out with that first single, and it was just,
I remember them. Yeah.
Oh, it was insufferable, man. It was real bad. Anyway, I'm surprised that didn't make everybody's list, but. Man, King's X, Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, one of the greatest rock albums I think of all time. And the reason I say that, King's X never got the commercial success that they deserved ever. But if you ask any musician from the 80s and the 90s who they were listening to and who they were heavily influenced by, it was, the guys from Metallica, George Lynch, Warren DeMartini from Rat. I mean, you ask these guys, what's in your player right now? They're all like, oh, King's X. They were the musicians' band. And the reason why they didn't get that commercial success is because they were different. They didn't fit. They were what I call a tweener. They're musicians that they're not metal. They're not rock. They're not hard rock. They're all of them and then something else, the fact that they had these huge melodic harmonizing backup vocals that were reminiscent of the Beatles, with this soulful, spiritual sounding lead vocalist, all of them, giving their talents to the lead vocals at times in different songs, giving each song its own flavor and feel. They were, in my opinion, the band of the 80s and 90s. That influenced probably every other band more than any other band. They were the musicians' band. I cannot tell you the amount of times I saw them mentioned in interviews with mainstream, some of what we consider, the guitar idols of that era, the George Lynches and all those guys. And they would all be saying, yeah, I'm King's X. That's what I'm listening to. That's what's influencing me right now. And you can hear it going from the 80s into the 90s, that drop tune sound that those guys were doing back in the 70s before they even blew up in the 80s, because they got together in the 70s and started, really doing it, I think in the mid 80s, with Out of the Silent Planet, their first record. But man, that band was so unique and so unlike anything that's ever been before them or after them. In my opinion, they're unique in the same way that Zeppelin's unique, or, just think of, any band that of that everybody tried to sound like but couldn't. They were that band. And if you think about it, they changed the way the guitar was being played, with the drop tunings, intermingling weird tunings into it, but still keeping it melodic, the way bass sounds on and off of records. I will tell you this much. Every time that I produce a heavy song, I'm always endeavoring to get that type of bi-amped bass tone. And I've had the pleasure of talking to those guys on multiple occasions and picking their brains about certain things. And, Doug Pinnick, obviously the lead vocalist and the bass players for King's X, he had the most unique bass sound anybody had ever heard at that point. He bi-amped, he literally ran all of his high-end frequencies through distorted guitar amps, and then all the low-end frequencies through sub-cabinets. So he had clean going to his lows and distorted going to his highs, and then he would blend the two. And then he, topped it off by adding 8 and 12 string basses to the mix, which gives a, natural distortion and a chorus effect in the bass. So, after that point, everybody was trying to achieve those type of bass tones. And it also created that bass heavy, that thick low end in the mixes. Producers and musicians alike tried to achieve that going into the 90s, whether they had that style of music or not. They wanted that big bottom sound, that big fat low end. And they totally influenced a ton of what we would call grunge bands that, I've never considered Alice in Chains to be a grunge band. I think they're a heavy metal band with just a complete unique vibe to the way that they did the vocals.
Yeah.
Great guitars, great bass, great drums, everything that you know of and consider to be good metal. Doug Pinnick told me to my face that the song Them Bones off of the Alice in Chains Dirt album was stolen directly from King's X when King's X was opening for Alice in Chains. And they were rehearsing a new song on the stage while they were sound checking in front of the guys from Alice in Chains. Next thing you know, they hear that dun 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 dun. I mean, if you listen to that riff, it's totally King's X. Doug Pinnick was like, yeah, they stole that from us. And I'm like, once I started thinking about it, it was totally a King's X riff. But yeah, there would have never been a Alice in Chains or any of those bands if it hadn't have been for, and now in kind of more modern times, bands like Seven Dust and Korn, the different, you can hear in the way that the low end is mixed, the bass tones are and stuff like that. They definitely changed music. And to me, that is an indicator of greatness, whether you had, critical success or not. If you were a band that absolutely changed music, and they did, they changed it vocally, they changed it in the way things were mixed, they changed it tonally, song structure wise. And I would have to say that they were probably one of the top 3 bands to influence me as a player and as a writer over the years. I think one area where they lacked a little bit was Sam Taylor, the guy that discovered them, overproduced the crap out of that band. I mean, he polished them up into, it almost sounded like pop music. It was so overproduced, and it did not favor their sound at all. And I think that, those records might have been bigger had they not had a little bit more of that edge on them. But, then they got into the 90s and did the Dogman record, and Brendan O'Brien produced them and just took all of the polish off them and left them like a live band, just what they sound like live. And that is absolutely a masterpiece. But this album, as far as like songs go, I mean, it's got, songs like Summerland and Over My Head. And I mean, just the whole album is a journey, man. You listen to it and it's impossible not to be taken. Was it you, Darren, that said you don't like long albums?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of anything over an hour specifically. I do like a 45, 50-minute album.
This album is different in the respect of like it literally takes you on this journey and you feel like you're traveling as you're listening to it because it's going.
So it's a concept album. Is that what we're saying?
It is a bit, but all of their albums are this way. I mean, they're also, each song is uniquely different, but they all sound like King's X. But they'll take you out of one song to be heavy and gritty and grimy and dirty into something really pristine and acoustic and beautiful, multi-layered harmonies. And then they just weave in and out of it. And by the time you get to the end of the album, you feel like you spent 10 minutes listening to it, but you feel like you're in a different place than when you started. So it's just, this album, every King's X record, up until Dogman, I consider to be just absolute rock and roll masterpieces. I think they kind of slipped off a little bit after Dogman. It kind of went a little bit weird. I think they got a little more too experimental, got away from what made them. But all of their The Silent Planet, this one, Faith, Hope, and Love, and then Dogman are just absolute. Every one of those albums would have to be in my top 20 all time.
Cool.
Brilliant, mate. Thank you very much. I know Mark's got to go, so I'm only going to be a couple of minutes, mate, just to say my honourable mentions. So, Skid Row debut album,
wow,
loved it.
That one.
Loved it, but much preferred Slave to the Grind. But Skid Row was still a great album. Kingdom Come, brought out In Your Face. Kingdom Come in Your Face. That was the joke, by the way, at the time. Great album. Lizzie Borden, Master of Disguise. Love Lizzie Borden, man. Absolutely love him. That wasn't my best album from him, but Sabotage, Gutter Ballet. Oh yeah, Lizzie Borden. Sabotage, Gutter Ballet, absolutely brilliant album. Very underrated band. Shout, Christian band, In Your Face. Love that. They brought out In Your Face as well, but Shout, In Your Face. It's clever, isn't it? But Ken Tamplin, great singer. I must admit, he gets on my nerves a little bit online at the moment. He's singing coaches. He does get on my nerves a little bit, but he's a great singer and musician. XYZ brought out their debut album. They're a great band. Sort of come and went. Bad Time, debut album in 1989. And then just a few that I'm just going to mention. They're not my honorable mentions, but I think they deserve a mention, as in they came out. Overkill, thrash band, The Years of Decay, Faith No More, The Real Thing.
Yeah.
Not everyone's cup of tea, but I loved that album when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously that had a lot to do with the changes in music at the time, for sure. And White Snake, not my favourite era of White Snake, but Slip of the Tongue came out that year as well. I mean, I preferred the White Snake pre-1987, but that's just me. So, man, that's it. We're done.
Awesome.
Well, Mark's got to go, and if Mark literally has to go, I actually have to go because I've sank 4 beers while we've been chatting, and man, I need a piss. Badly.
Oh, you need to go to the toilet. You could have left and gone to the toilet, you know that.
Yeah, I could have, and I kept thinking about doing it, but then I thought, no, I won't.
Just diapers next time. Just go with
Darren, you were so happy.
Look, I know there hasn't been.
I'll just do the video from the toilets. You know, whatever.
I know there hasn't been that many people watching, but it's been consistent, and all these guys seem to have stayed and listened. So that's cool. You know what I mean? And it's good to have a chat with you guys anyway. It doesn't matter if no one's watching. We're having a chat about music. That's what it's all about. We're not going to meet each other very soon, are we? So why not? There
Absolutely.
You go.
It's a good time.
So yeah, I mean, I want maybe we arrange for something like once a month or something like that, and we'll do another year again if you guys are interested. I can have up to like 10 people on, so we can get some more people on if you want.
Cool.
Absolutely.
Let's do it.
All right, cheers then, guys. Thanks for joining me. It's been a pleasure as always. All
Thanks,
right,
man.
Thanks, lads.
guys. Cheers.
Peace out.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.